would go viral. And
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to avoid that because, resist that because I felt like I was representing a lot of people. And I just wanted the fact to be known that it is important that we have representation through the sports teams at the White House.
I just think it's my job here to try to broker some kind of peace. I just think he should at least mail you some Big Macs.
Well, I was going to say that on CNN. I was like, we probably would have skipped the lunch serving.
Oh, good Lord. Hey, let me quickly thank Shelley Bean, the Sports Queen book series. Our friend Shelley Boyen-Breen is the author. I follow her on Facebook and on Twitter, and she's everywhere. She's always speaking at schools, and she does so because her book series is about a little girl who loves sports. And one of the things Shelley, the author, believes is that that girls are underrepresented when it comes to youth books and especially youth sports books. So this is about Shelley being the sports queen, who is always learning new sports, who shows persistence, who gets knocked down, who gets back up, who has an interesting group of friends who are also underrepresented in this kind of literature. And at the end of every story, Shelley Bean reflects on her day and what she's accomplished and rewards herself by making a new sports charm for her crown. I've told you about the reviews I've seen online, and the reviews praise they're beautiful books. First of all, if you come to the live shows, you've probably seen them. We display them. We'll be doing that at the Poorhouse as well. But they're beautiful books, and they display diversity among Shelley and her friends. And they're well written. I'm a writer. I appreciate what she's doing. So go to ShelleyBeanTheSportsQueen.com and enter the code LinksCoachReeve at checkout. You get 15% off the cover price. You can check out the new 5-pack, the Shelley Bean poster. You can become a member of the fan club and much more. I recommend you going and finding Shelley and following on whatever social media you like to use. You'll get a good look at the books and you'll have a good sense. And again, we'll show off the books at our next live show. So the Title IX is interesting because David Berry is no longer writing for Forbes, even though he should be. But Forbes has recently run, or at least I've recently seen a piece by a I'm going to screw this up, S. Lesser. I hope I get that right.
It's just what we do, Jim.
I know. It was what I do. It's my thing. It's my specialty. It's my lone skill. And it's entitled, "Here's Why Women's Teams Are Coached by Men." And it gets into it, and I'm sure you know this better than I do, that Title IX comes along, and all of a sudden colleges who usually had women coaching women's teams, now all of a sudden the salaries go up for women for coaching women's collegiate teams, and all of a sudden men want those jobs and men get those jobs. So while Title IX has been great for the female athlete, it hasn't necessarily been all that great for female coaches, which is a really strange thing.
Well, you're exactly right. Exactly as the article indicated. It's really unfortunate, but it highlights exactly what we're talking about with regard to decision makers that are largely white men. That they, before not Title IX, before 1972, they didn't have as much interest, and that all of a sudden, when Title IX and increasing the equity, the resources available for the women's team went way up. And so then men get interested. These decision makers get interested. And they say, well, it's got to be a man's job now, right? Because it's so much money. There's so much at stake now. And then I also think that these athletic directors, I think what they fall into is you do what you know. And I said this on the podcast around Adam Silver and the hiring of our president, that unfortunately what you do, as a white male is you go, okay, who do I know? Who do I trust? And if you look, that trail is oftentimes people that look just like them. And unfortunately, I think that's what they turn to. And we went from 90% of women's teams being coached by women to we are now under 50%. And that is true in the WNBA as well. And so, it's one of those things that you said, it was, it's great. We've made progress in women's sports and the opportunities, participation has gone through the roof, for girls, competing in sports. And it just, like you said, it just hasn't, unfortunately, had the same effect, for women opportunities to be able to coach. I think that depending on the athlete that you speak to, I think what we find really important as women is that these athletes need role models. They need to see what they can become after they play. And if you look around at the other sports besides basketball, it's probably even worse. If you look at a sport like soccer, that is, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's got to be close to 80 or 90% men.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's unfortunate for women, that we are not viewed worthy of these important jobs that they've invested more in.
You're reminding me of a conversation I had when I was covering the Vikings in the early 90s. Tony Dungy came there as defensive coordinator, and that's really where his coaching career took off, because he had been, he had lost his job with Pittsburgh. He had become a secondary coach with Kansas City. Denny Green brought him here to be a defensive coordinator, and he was fantastic. One of the best coaches I've ever been around. And obviously he wanted to become a head coach, and I used to talk to him about it, sometimes on the record, sometimes just off the record, shooting the breeze. And what he would always say was, I would ask him, is this racism that there aren't more black coaches, that you're not getting more of a shot? And his perspective, and maybe he was just trying to be diplomatic, but I felt like this is also something he would say even when he wasn't on the record. He'd say, I don't think NFL owners are racist. I think they are limited in the way they think. And that is, and he said, they want to hire the next Bill Parcells, the next Bill Walsh, the next Vince Lombardi. So they look for someone who reminds them of those guys, who looks like those guys. So, I mean, I'm not saying that's not racist, but what he was trying to say was he didn't think that if there is a distinction to be made, he didn't think that the NFL owners were overtly racist. He thought they were passively racist, I guess.
Well, and racism is racism. It's unfortunate. And I think, Tony's a very classy guy, right? That I think, would have the ability to manage that situation well. But I think it's very obvious, that they needed the Rooney Rule to be able to, create more opportunities. And I think we could use the same thing on our side with the women. Not in women's jobs. I mean, that should go without saying. But I'm talking about men's sports. Perhaps that's a way to. I've never been that into quotas. But as I've researched more in other countries and the things that work, like a place like Sweden, that in the C-suite, it's a required percentage that of the C-suite has to be women. And there was a time that I thought it shouldn't have to be that way, but the reality is it does. In order to force certain people to open their mind, exactly what Tony was talking about, open their minds to other ways of doing things. And I think that professional sports, maybe even in college too, that it's very much copycat. So I understand what he's saying. The next Bill Parcells, whatever wins in our league, that's the next thing that people are looking for. When Bill Laimbeer and Michael Cooper led their teams to a championship series together, well, guess what? The NBA guys were getting the opportunities to coach. When Lynn Dunn, as an assistant coach, turned head coach, won a championship. When Cheryl Reeve, as an assistant coach, got a job and had some success, then all of a sudden they go, okay, who's the next assistant coach? Mm-hmm. So that's just kind of I guess maybe that's just human nature. I don't know, but I think for women, just in terms of this topic, I just other than maybe what do we have in athletic directors? Women less than 10%. Mm-hmm. So that exacerbates the problem that, the decision makers are going to, hire more like themselves. And until we change that, we're going to continue to have this problem.
In the NFL, the Rooney Rule comes under attack frequently because sometimes it is seen as tokenism. Sometimes teams find a way around it. Sometimes teams just, flaunt it. But there is value in getting people in the door. And Absolutely. I remember Mike Tomlin was a defensive coordinator here, and he had one good year. Not even a great year, frankly, but he just was a dynamic personality. And the Steelers, who very rarely change coaches and who generally make really good hires, everybody thought they were going to hire a former Steeler who had been a coach. And I'm blanking on his name right now, but he's a former offensive lineman with the Steelers who had coached, he coached, I think it was Russ Grimm. Somebody I don't know. I'm not getting right. The point being that the Steelers had an opportunity to hire some people who were very familiar to them. They had an opportunity to hire some people who were the, quote unquote, top coaching candidates on the market, all white guys. Mike Tomlin went as there's an interview and blew them away, and they hired him. And if there hadn't been the Rooney Rule, they might not have ever even talked to the guy.
That's exactly right. And so you can see these things, you can view them in different ways. And there are some that don't believe in giving opportunities to a wide range of prospects, if you will. And so I think those, no matter what you do, no matter, rules to try to force them, no matter what you do, they're going to see it a certain way, and they're going to do what they do. But I think the ones that would not maybe have done it on their own, but were given this opportunity, like with a Mike Tomlin, and that's what it's about. Like you said, get in the room and earn the job. And you give them credit for being open-minded. Like you said, it seemed like it was maybe a pretty difficult choice. A former player versus you're hiring a black coach, and so that was something that I think was. It was something that I thought really moved the league forward, in doing that. And again, when Mike Tomlin's successful, guess what? Other black coaches get a chance. And then the same thing happens the other way. Now, we don't do the same thing for white coaches, whether male or female. When white male coaches aren't successful, they don't ruin the chance for the next white guy.
Right.
But this, when coaches of color, maybe one isn't as successful for whatever the reason, then they go, okay, see that black coaches aren't any good. And so that's been something I've seen, through, my gosh, I'm almost 30 years into coaching. And I've seen all of that along the way. And I want to mention, too, for women, in terms of opportunities, there's a narrative by men that are the reasons why they say that there aren't enough qualified women. They're saying is because women don't want to coach, like a Gino or Ariema comment, that he thinks
Gino
that women don't.
That?
He did. It was unfortunate. And his daughter kind of read him the riot act, and she was exactly right. It is not the case that women don't want to coach. They say, well, women want to have, families, and that's just really, really unfortunate, because you can have a family and coach just like the men do. But it's looked at differently in terms of what a man's role is in the family. And so I just think that's, it's just a really unfortunate, unfair sort of narrative that is simply not true. Women want to coach, and we're seeing more and more of that. Former players, there's, like I said, participation rate is through the roof. And so all these players, when they're done playing, they don't want to leave sports. And, and there are some that maybe say they don't want to, the rigmarole of coaching and being away and, traveling for recruiting and just the grind. And that's okay. But I don't think that's okay to kind of paint with a broad brush that women don't want to coach. And I think that's a narrative that's completely false.
You worked with Gino, obviously. I covered the Olympics where he was his assistant. Did you get that sense from him when you were working with him?
No, I think it was a really, it was a gaffe, if you will.
Yeah.
That I don't think that's really what was in his heart. But again, when men say things about women, it must be true. And so I think maybe that was maybe in his circle. Maybe that's how they felt. But I don't think that's in Gino what he truly really feels. And he had a lot of people that came out of the woodwork to tell him so, how off he was in saying that, and how damaging something like that is from a person that is in the position that he is in at the top of our game. That when he speaks, again, if Gino Ariema is saying something, it must be true. And so those are things that, kind of damage you, and you have to kind of dig out from that and try to change the narrative. I think men that coach women's basketball are passionate about it. I have no problem with men coaching. It's more about, where are the opportunities for women, and why did the opportunities go down from 90% to under 50%? Because there was more money involved. And that's the problem that we have to address.
Absolutely. We're going to buzz through just a couple more topics here, and then we're going to let Cheryl go. Thanks to everybody who listens. Reminders, 6 p.m., March 20th. Downtown Minneapolis, the Pour House. You can find all the information about them at the Pour House, P-O-U-R, house, MPLS.com, the Pour House. And it's the downtown location that we're going to do the show at. Show up, and you know how this stuff works. You show up, we get to keep doing live shows. We build a really fun thing. We've done it before. So come out, support Cheryl, support women's basketball, support the Pour House, have a blast with it. And also remember that we have the deal with Bite Squad this week. The promo code is hockey, and that will get you 10% off your order. The promo code going all the time is Talk North. If you're new to Bite Squad and you want to get free delivery on your first order from bitesquad.com or the Bite Squad app. So Simone Augustus, one of the athletes going into the 2019 class of National High School Hall of Fame.
Yeah, really exciting time for Simone. That's a pretty elite invite.